Hello and welcome to Filling the Sink, a podcast from Catalan News. My name's Beth Cohen and today we'll be talking about Catalan Week in Japan. In 2025, Catalonia and Japan strengthened their ties with a year-long celebration, including Catalan Week in Japan, which takes place from May the 27th to June the 1st at the Universal Expo in Osaka. This week on Filling the Sink, we explore the relationship between Catalonia and Japan and visit the Expo to find out how Catalonia is promoting its culture. Joining me in the studio today is Gerard Escaich Folch. Hello, Gerard.
Hi, hello. Should I say konnichiwa?
Yes, you should. So, Gerard, what exactly is Catalan Week?
So the Catalan Week is part of a 2025 year-long celebration of the Catalan Japan year. It also takes place in the context of the Expo 2025 in Osaka, and that's why we are celebrating Catalan and Japan Week with this podcast, and especially because Catalonia is a special guest this year, and the goal is to strengthen the links between Catalonia and Japan in the current worldwide situation and the current affairs going on around the globe. And the idea is for Catalonia to consolidate new strategic alliances, and that's what the Catalan government said and has been promoting, that offer new opportunities into the future.
And which other regions are featured?
Well, in the Expo 2025 in Osaka, there are over 160 countries. It's a 6-month exposition in Osaka, and for example, Spain has its own pavilion, the Spanish pavilion, and Catalonia, even though it's part of the Spanish pavilion, it's not the only region featured in the event. For example, there is also Andalusia, Extremadura, Canary Islands, Galicia, Castilla-La Mancha, and there's also Castilla y León.
And every exposition features different Spanish regions, right?
Exactly. For example, Catalonia was last featured in 2015, back in Milano Exposition in Italy, but in the 2020 or 2021 Expo in Dubai, for example, it was not present.
And how often are the Universal Expos held?
They are held every 5 years at different locations, and the next one, the 2030, is scheduled to take place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
Now, historically, there have been some very memorable expositions, such as the 1889 Paris event, for which the Eiffel Tower was commissioned. And Catalonia has also hosted the Expo twice, right?
Yes, exactly. Barcelona hosted the Expo in 1888 and in 1929. It was before the Convention of Paris, so that's when the 5-year mark was set. It was a little bit different in terms of working. But, for example, the 1888, people will visualize it in Barcelona if they walk around Parc de la Ciutadella, because at the time all the pavilions were built to host the exposition, including the Arc de Triomphe or the Triumph Arch and the pavilions nearby. And in the other case, in the 1929 exposition, it took place in the Montjuic Mountain, where the MNAC, the Catalan National Art Museum, is featured on top of the hill, and there are also some pavilions nearby. Those were built, including the Magic Fountain, those were built for the 1929 exposition.
So it really transformed the face of the city. And what do the installations look like this year in Osaka?
The Spanish one is kind of very open and beautiful in terms of color palette. It has a long stairway, and in the middle of the stairway there is a large hall, which is the entry door, and it forms a circle because of the colors, and it resembles a sun. So the stairs are painted in blue, the sun, so you can imagine it's kind of a sunset, sunrise, depending on which side of Spain you are looking to the sea. And it's inspired by the Kuroshio current, which is also known as the Japan current, and linked Spain with Japan through its maritime trade. So it dates back to a long time in history.
And speaking of history, what can you tell me about the historical relationship between Japan and Catalonia?
Well, it started long time ago, long time ago in the 16th century, when four Japanese Christian travelers visited Barcelona and the Montserrat monastery. There's a podcast about it. So they were the Tensho Ken-oh Shisetsu, and they met Spain's Felipe II, the monarch back then, and they traveled to Spain because it was one of the prosperous countries in the world due to the New World's richness, so America and South America.
A great world power at the time. And what about the more recent relationship between Catalonia and Japan?
Well, everything changed a little bit during World War II, obviously because of the political relationship was a little bit more tense. There was Francoism at the time here in Spain and Catalonia, so the relationship was almost inexistent.
But with the end of the dictatorship after Franco's death in 1975, the relationship was re-established.
Exactly. Japan and Catalonia regained relationship in the 1970s and the 80s, mainly promoted by the former Catalan president back then, Jordi Pujol, who looked Catalonia and promoted Catalonia overseas. And that's when many companies from Japan started setting their offices in the Catalan territory. In fact, at the moment, that tradition continues, and almost half of Japanese companies in Spain are based here in Catalonia. Just so you know. For example, the Japanese consulate in Barcelona opened its offices in 1987.
And what about their current trade relationship?
Well, it has been growing, and for example, at the moment there are 883 exporting Catalan companies to Japan, and they export worth 1 billion euros in products, mainly pork, vehicles, and chemical products. But on the other way around, we also have 1.9 billion euros worth of products imported from Japan to Catalonia, mainly, as everyone would imagine, vehicles, machinery, and electronic devices.
And excellent Kirin beer. And I imagine that tourism also plays an important role in terms of the economic relationship.
It does, but you would be surprised that, for example, Barcelona doesn't have a direct flight with Tokyo. And although that, for example, Japan was among the 20 countries that saw more travelers visiting Catalonia in terms of statistics last year. And for example, there were over 264,000 Japanese travelers coming to Catalonia.
And there's a strong mutual cultural interest. For example, here in Catalonia, we have Japanese manga.
Yeah, Bola de Drag, for example, we did a podcast about it. And we also did a podcast on Japan in Catalonia. So now we are doing Catalonia in Japan.
The interest is mutual. So to find out more, our colleagues at ACN went to Osaka to find out what's happening during Catalan Week at the Universal Exposition. Let's hear what's going down at the Spanish Pavilion.
Well, there are many things going on at the moment. For example, there's workshops on gastronomy, on Catalan art, as well as there's virtual reality experiences for people to travel to Catalonia without moving from Osaka. And for those who want to test a little bit Catalan technology, there is even an ACT project, which allows to capture brainwave data through wireless electroencephalograms. Wow. And it becomes like an emotional state level. And for example, it generates an image and a haiku, which for those who don't know what haiku means, it's a short form of poetry, obviously originating in Japan. And it typically consists of like 3 lines with a 5-7-5-syllable structure.
And obviously you can't talk about Catalonia without mentioning our great gastronomy.
Yeah, there is pan tomàquet workshops, there is wine tasting. To be fair, I would love to be there.
But we can just go downstairs to the bar and get all of that. People in Japan can't do that.
Yeah, exactly. That happened to Daiki Mori, who is a Japanese guy who visited the Spanish Pavilion and the Catalan Week and was very surprised that he learned that you need to rub the tomato on the bread.
トマトをこのパンにこするっていうのは驚きました。
And there was also the Gushi, who, even though she has already traveled to Spain twice and to Catalonia, and she had already tasted pan tomàquet, but she was doing it herself for the first time in Osaka.
でも私スペイン何回か行ってカタルーニャも
And she was looking forward to do it at home whenever the season of tomatoes is.
パンコントマテは食べたことがあったんですけど作ったのは初めてで
And Toteno says that it was very tasty and she learned that you needed to use a ripe tomato and that she's looking forward to doing it at home.
トマトを使うっていうのを教えていただいたので、はい、早速やりたいです。はい。
There's also Miyako, who said that it was really funny. She enjoyed the wine tasting.
最高でした。最高です。
But the pan tomàquet was incredible. She'd never tasted tomato in such a tasty way. She was very impressed with it.
And there was also Tomoko, who she says that it's the most luxurious way of eating tomato in the world, and she was very surprised of how good it was.
世界一贅沢なトマトの食べ方ですっごい美味しくてびっくりしました。
And aside from surprises, there was also some people who discovered the workshop.
いや並んでて入ってからメニューが来ないから
They were planning to go to the restaurant, such as the Gushi says, but because they were queuing and they found the information pamphlet there, they started to do a workshop on pan tomàquet.
There you go. Why go to a restaurant if you can make it yourself? And I gather Catalonia has sent some of the top chefs as ambassadors to the event.
Yeah, visitors were able to meet Carme Ruscalleda, one of the first chefs worldwide to win 3 Michelin stars. She was the head chef of the Sant Pau restaurant here in Sant Pol de Mar, north of Barcelona, and she had also the Sant Pau in Tokyo. So she already knew about the culture. And there was also Joan Roca, a chef at El Celler de Can Roca, one of the awesome Michelin star restaurants Catalonia has. And El Celler de Can Roca, for example, has won the best restaurant in the world twice, in 2013 and 2015. They were both promoting Catalonia as this year's World Region of Gastronomy.
La persona que ens va contractar per portar un Sant Pau a Tòquio volia...
And for example, Ruscalleda, who already knew about Tokyo and the Japanese culture because she was brought to open a Sant Pau restaurant there, they were asked to bring the Maresma-based cuisine, but what they didn't expect, she says, is that they would learn a lot in return.
El que nosaltres no sospitàvem és que de retornada ens n'emportaríem moltes coses.
Ruscalleda says that she's sure that the contact with Japan improved the cuisine that they did at Sant Pau because they discovered and learned new techniques.
And Chef Josep Barahona, who's a pioneer in bringing Catalan cuisine to Japan over 25 years ago, also says that he thinks that Catalans are a little bit shy, a little bit more serious and maybe a little bit more rigid, which is a quality that's very Japanese.
Jo, sincerament, crec que els catalans som una mica callats, una mica seriots.
And perhaps they don't have that element of fun or energy characteristic of other regions, but in that way, Catalan people are very similar to the Japanese. So as well as being a little bit rigid, they're also very serious with their work and love what they work on.
In fact, Barahona was saying, aside from the similitudes in terms of character, was also the gastronomical similitudes because Catalonia and Japan mainly use produce and seasonal produce, and that's a very basic cuisine, but at the same time, it has a lot of work behind. Something that Joan Roca from El Celler de Can Roca shared because he said that Catalan cuisine is at its best moment ever, and he says so based on his own knowledge.
Jo crec que la cuina catalana està en el millor moment de la seva història.
And because Catalan cuisine has come from a revolution, a worldwide revolution with Chef Ferran Adrià, and movements that have brought new techniques and ideas that have modified world cuisine. But Roca also says that there is a new generation that has understood this revolution, but is also at the same time looking forward or looking back to traditional cuisine.
Tenim una nova generació que ha sapigut entendre aquesta revolució, però al mateix temps ho està fent amb una mirada posada també en la tradició.
So cuisine aside, what else do Japanese people make of Catalan culture?
カタルーニャの人はシエスタをあまりしないことが分かりました。
Well, this is Deki Mori. We've heard from him before, and he says that he learned that Catalans do not practice siesta.
Sagrada Familia, スペイン艦隊。
Sagrada Familia, スペイン艦隊。あと日本の侍が。
Also, Miyako and Tomoko say that they've never been to Catalonia, but they would love to visit. And the only things they'd heard about were the Sagrada Familia and the history of a samurai who travelled there.
And, for example, there was a couple from Osaka who did not expect to listen to Alide Sanz, an Aranese music player in the Spanish pavilion. They expected to hear something a little bit more different, like Carmen, the opera, even though it's a French opera by Georges Bizet.
はい、すごい行きたいんですけど、なんかスペインオーバーツーリズムで向こうの人が来るなって言ってたので。
水かけられる。
They were expecting to listen to Carmen. And they would love to visit Catalonia, they say, but are aware that they will not be welcomed as there is too much tourism and people shoot water guns at tourists.
Oh, terrible international press we've got for that. So, Gerard, we've talked about gastronomy, we've talked about siestas. What are we missing?
Obviously, football. How can you talk about Catalonia and Barcelona without talking about FC Barcelona? Well, in Osaka's exposition, there is a video as well talking about the history of Barça, coinciding with the 125th anniversary of the team, which was last year. And there is also about Ronald Koeman, Lamine Yamal, so modern and I would say older history, but obviously my father would be angry at me for saying him older.
Barça, past and present. And I gather there are also art activities at the pavilion.
Yeah, one of the main characters or one of the main figures from Catalonia that traveled to Japan in terms of artistic movement was Joan Miró. He's an artist, an abstract artist, mainly known for, well, a lot of things. He even has a mural on the floor of La Rambla near El Liceu, where the tragic events of August 2017 took place. But Joan Miró, for example, is present at the exposition in Osaka because he was already back in Osaka in the 1970 Expo.
Oh.
Back then, he painted a mural for the exposition itself, and it's at the moment exhibited at the National Art Museum in Osaka. But because the Fundación Miró is celebrating its 50th anniversary and to commemorate Joan Miró's legacy, there is also an exposition and several workshops on Miró. For example, Miró traveled to Tokyo and Kyoto in 1966 for the first time ever, because both museums had prepared an exhibition on him. And following that history and the relationship between Japan and Catalonia, Japanese visitors or any visitor at Osaka can play and can become Miró and paint a little bit as him.
That sounds really enjoyable. And Gerard, what about Catalan architecture? Many of the people that our ACN colleagues interviewed mentioned the Sagrada Familia, but how is our architecture being represented at the Expo?
Well, we talked about Miró and abstract art, and we also need to mention about Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí, mastermind of Sagrada Familia and many other buildings, and also mastermind or like one of the main figures of modernism, Art Nouveau architectural style here. He had a special technique called el trencadís, which was breaking a lot of different colorful ceramics and gluing them together to make a mosaic. And from that, you can have several examples, La Pedrera, Parkway, and many, many more. So they are using Gaudí's trencadís to form a map to find asbestos in Barcelona using nanosatellite imagery, and they, instead of painting it in colors, they use Gaudí's trencadís.
So it's mixing art with technology.
And obviously we cannot talk about Catalan architecture or Japanese architecture related to Catalonia without mentioning Esturo Soto, who is the head sculptor at Sagrada Familia, for example. He's Japanese. Or Japanese architects Arata Isozaki, known for Palau Sant Jordi, or architect Toyo Ito, whose main building, for example, is Hotel Portafira, a red, large hotel near the Fira da Gran Via exhibition halls.
And I gather there are also musical activities.
Yeah, because the Spanish pavilion is like a large open area. There is like an outside stage with, for example, a Catalan artist such as the Aranese singer Alida Sanz. We heard about her before. And there was also performances by Catalan rumba group Muchacho and Los Sobrinos. And there was also Yoshiaki Matsumoto, or his stage name, Como es Tanuki, even though it feels like a Spanish, but in fact it's a Japanese name, is because he has a Catalan rumba group in Japan. Yeah, he says that Catalan rumba in Japan is obviously not that known, but with the events taking place at the Catalan Week in Osaka, it will help to know Catalan rumba a little bit more, and that he says that it's this kind of musical genre is very fun and he likes it a lot because he learned about Catalan rumba listening to a rumba group that they sang a song in Japanese.
バルセロナのルンバ・タルンバというグループがあって、そのルンバ・タルンバが
So he got very emotional and he wanted to meet them, and he obviously traveled to Barcelona to visit them, and they ended up singing together, so he had so much fun. And obviously that happened in Barcelona, but performing in front of his colleagues and his counterparts, he had a lot of nerves, but he said it was very, very fun. And because he had so much fun, it added years into his life, so he's very happy for that as well.
Long live Japan and its rumberos. It sounds like a great event, but what are the benefits of Catalonia taking part in this expo?
Well, one of the many ideas is to grow the interest of Catalonia for those Japanese who don't know about the region, as well as to welcome more tourists in the future, or to have like more trade relationships between Catalan and Japanese companies.
We heard from Sachiko Yoshimura, who's the Director General of the Japan Association for the 2025 World Exposition.
Of course, everybody knows Spain, but I think Barcelona, Catalonia is the area that Japan is really interested because we have many of these tourists going to Barcelona, of course, we have this really good image of Spain, Barcelona. But I think it's important that you have this week here. And so everybody goes to the Spanish pavilion, and they are actually introducing in Catalonia what they have in like a culture, also food, and also the history. And it's really important that you get the message out, because everybody is already interested in Spain. But Catalonia, maybe they need some more information. And so this week, I think it's amazing to put out the message of, because everybody loves to go to Barcelona. They know at the city. And also, I think we need to have the maybe more exposure, so they will definitely decide for this summer holiday to go to Spain and Catalonia.
And among the guests that traveled to Expo 2025 in Osaka and coinciding with the Catalan Week, there was Catalan President Salvador Illa, who also said that it was a great opportunity for Catalonia to be known around the world.
A través de tot això, ball, música, art, cuina, gastronomia...
Through all this, dance, music, art, cuisine, gastronomy, paintings, Joan Miró, we want to transfer an identity, the Catalan identity, expressed in a language and culture. An identity that is inclusive, that is open, that has deep roots, but is also open to the future.
Profundes, però que també està oberta al futur.
Well, that's almost all we have time for today. But before we go, it's time for our Catalan phrase of the week. Gerard, what do we have?
Fer-ne 5 cèntims.
To make 5 cents of it.
Yeah, you will normally use it whenever someone's traveling to Japan, for example, and they want to explain you their trip. You can ask them, fes-me 5 cèntims. So just be brief and explain it fast for me.
Keep it short and sweet.
Yeah, in a nutshell.
This week on Filling the Sink, we've been talking about Catalan Week in Japan. Thank you to everyone who spoke with us, and thank you to our ACN colleagues corresponding from Osaka. And of course, thank you to you, Gerard, for joining me here in the studio.
A pleasure as always.
Namaste. That's all we have time for today. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to Filling the Sink wherever you get your podcasts if you haven't done so already. We'll be back again next Saturday with another exciting episode of Filling the Sink. On behalf of all the team here at Catalan News, I'm Beth Cohen, wishing you a great weekend. Fins aviat. Sayonara, baby.